What's good, YouTube? It's your boy Andre King coming at you today. And if you've been following this mini-series, then I know you're super excited for today's video because it's finally time to deploy and configure our very own Palo Alto firewall. But before we do that, let's go ahead and catch everyone else up on what led us to this point. So this mini-series is all about delivering on these contract deliverables for this contract with top flight security of the world. If we successfully complete each of these deliverables, then we've got $5,000 coming to us. As you can see, we did a lot of planning here. Each of these tasks and activities have already been completed on this checklist that you see here. Along with that, we also created our very own IP spreadsheet, which will come in handy and can be used as a source of reference. And we completed part of one of the deliverables, which along with that final report is to create a network diagram. So while this diagram looks very simple in nature, we're actually going to use it today when we configure these three interfaces. So here's our checklist for deploying the Palo Alto firewall. And looking at it, we're actually probably going to break this down into two parts. But today, we're going to actually do this primary task of deploying the Palo Alto firewall in AWS. And it's going to start with each of these different activities here. And we'll walk through and take our time to explain what each of those parts do so that we can make sure that each of us are on the same level playing field. We'll probably give it a break and wrap this up down here when we validate that we can actually log into the web console, and we'll come back on Saturday and configure the initial Palo Alto settings. So if that sounds like a plan, let's go ahead and get it. So from the AWS console, first of all, we want to make sure that we're in the actual region that we're going to be deploying our firewall, which of course for us is the US East 1 or the Northern Virginia region. Again, it's just to make sure that we're all on the same sheet of music. And of course, we have a EC2 tab open as well as a VPC. These are the two services that we'll need here today. So if you don't have them up and you're just in the overview, then you can either click on services and scroll down the list of different services. You could search to filter, let's say VPC. And one pretty cool thing that I like is for those services that you actually frequent a lot, you can just click on this star icon here. And when you come out of there, you can see that AWS actually puts the shortcuts for each of those in the banner or the dashboard section there for you. So first up, we're going to actually create those three network interfaces. And so for that, what we want to do is basically take a look here. And ETH0 is actually the primary interface, or kind of the interface that's attached or associated with the EC2 instance when it's deployed. And that's going to be used for our management interface. And this is the IP address .10. ETH1, which is the second interface, and ETH2, the third. This again is counting canonically starting at 0 instead of 1, will be the inside and outside interfaces respectively. So from here, I'm going to actually move this to other window, but let me go ahead and copy this, which is going to be our host name, but it'll make it a little bit easier when we click on network interfaces and create each of these three. So click the create network interface button there, and let's go ahead and paste this in and shore this up a bit. So we'll go ahead and type management right before AZ1, copy that. Now for subnet, if you go ahead and you see all of these here, each of the 10, you can just filter on 1A to just see the 5 subnets that are in availability zone 1A. Again, first for ETH0 or the first interface, this is going to be our management. And we don't want to let AWS select an IP address from that subnet for us, although we could. We're going to select custom. And from that Visio, or you could actually use the spreadsheet. This is going to be .10, And then down here, we created the security groups in the last video as well. So we'll select management and we'll give this a name tag with a value of the same thing as the description. Click create network interface and our very first network interface is created. As you can see, it is actually available, of course, to be attached to a resource. So let's go ahead and repeat that same process for our second interface, which is going to be the inside interface. Subnet 1A, we're going to filter down there, look for inside, set the IP address manually, 10.100.0.20, select the appropriate security group inside, and add that name tag. And there we go, our second interface is created. Now for this third one, we're going to do the same thing, but I'm actually going to show you what would happen if you weren't to basically specify a name tag. Anyone care to take a guess? All right, there we go. Outside. And again, we'll leave that for now. Actually, before we go, we would have left this without an IP address or left it to chance. Left a 0 out. There we go, 10.100.0.40. We'll hit create network interface. And as you can see here, we've got two that actually have a name, but our third one doesn't have a name tag, although it does have a description here. So let's go ahead and click the pencil icon to edit. And because we copied it, but we didn't apply, we'll just paste it on in there, hit the check mark, and there we go. So we have our three network interfaces created here. So let's go ahead and check that off. Next up is actually launching the EC2 instance. So to do that, we can click on the EC2 dashboard here and launch an instance. And then we need to search for the Palo Alto virtual machine. Let's go ahead and give it a name tag first. We'll remove the function, which was outside for the interface. And down here, the Amazon machine images, there's actually thousands of different applications and operating system images, as you can see here, that you can search for. Quicksort again are the most heavily utilized, and pretty cool that you see that there is a Mac OS AMI as well. But for us, let's go ahead and click this browse more AMI, and we're going to search for Palo Alto. Let's click in there and try that one more time. We'll hit enter. And we can see that we don't have an AMI saved yet, but if we took a snapshot and created an AMI out of that, then it would be listed here if we needed to deploy another. AWS Marketplace AMIs, of course, the ones that are trusted third parties by AWS, and community AMIs, UI, or anyone else could actually publish there. So let's go ahead and select here. And we need to actually take a look at the different various offerings by Palo Alto. But of course, Panorama is an application that manages centrally multiple Palo Alto firewalls. And because we're just deploying one, we don't need that. And so bundle one or bundle two, what's the difference? Well, as you can see here, this is actually an older article. Palo Alto did change their licensing model and went towards a flex credit. But as you can see in AWS and Azure, they still allow you to deploy EC2 instances in AWS with these bundle options. But if I zoom in a bit, bundle one comes with these different subscriptions. And really, because one of our deliverables is the VPN, which is, of course, their global protect product, and of course, doing some items with URL filtering. Because of that, we're going to need this bundle too. Now, if we scroll down a bit here, this is kind of the typical use case for when a customer will want to select bring your own licensing versus one of these bundles from the marketplace. And this, of course, if this was production, this would be a great candidate, again, to reduce the capital expenditure, because you're procuring a license for 1 or 3 years, and you will basically gain less cost there. But for us, because this is just kind of a proof of concept or development, then this bundle is a pretty good way to go. So back here, we now know that we need the bundle 2, so we will actually select it when it's time to deploy that. But first up, let's go ahead and take a look, right click and open this in a new tab, at actually some of the different information that's provided, not only for Palo Alto, but again, I'm not going to take too much time, but if we needed to deploy any other application here, this is the type of information that's provided about each of those applications. So starting off with a product overview, again, just highlighting some of the features of Palo Alto's next generation firewall on the virtual side, layer 7 application firewall, some of the different software and subscriptions that it provided. We just saw that there. You could actually get a free 15-day trial there, again, taking advantage of that. And if we scroll down, we're coming through the different tabs. We'll see that the pricing or the estimates are going to be based off of the instance size that we will choose to deploy it. If we scroll down, we'll see a star here beside the vendor recommended C5N.X large. And again, if this was production, we would potentially go with that. But we're actually going to be deploying this in a M5 large size, which will cost a little bit shade over $1 an hour. So we'll keep the time in mind. And that, of course, includes the EC2 infrastructure costs of 96 cents an hour and about 8 cents for the software each hour for the subscription Palo Alto. It's good to read the end user license agreement as well as some of the usage instructions and just a lot of useful information here. But we're going to keep this tab open because one good thing that we actually need is going to be, let's see, but it's actually the usage instructions. And as we can see, when we deploy it, this is going to give us the instructions on how we can actually SSH into our device, and these 2 commands that we need to actually, or 3 with commit, to set our administrative password. So we'll keep this open here. But for now, let's go back to launch an instance. We'll now select besides bundle 2. And we will go ahead and hit continue. All right, so there we go. We got our Palo Alto VM selected. We'll select again M5. We'll type .large, but it came up right there. Again, this will cost a little bit over $1 an hour if you were following along with me. Create a new key pair. We do need to go ahead and create a key pair name. We'll call this POC-Palo Alto Firewall, or the acronym there. Depending on the client that you're using, the SSH client, such as PuTTY, I'm actually going to be using a application called MOBA Xterm Secure CRT. Then you need to actually create the proper format or file extension for that key. But MOBA Xterm is pretty cool because it will accept either. But if you're using PuTTY, go ahead and select .ppk, and we'll hit create key pair, and that will actually download it for me to my downloads folder. And you need to keep that handy and securely stored so that no one else can get to that, because if they could potentially, of course, get to your resources and anything, or have privilege escalation potentially to reach other resources. So very, very cautious, and keep that one pretty secure. So now let's edit our network settings. And again, we have one VPC if you're following along with me. Subnet, again, is going to be here, but I don't think we need to pick a subnet if we pick the primary interface. So what we're going to do is come down to Auto assign, make sure that that's disabled. Security group name, description, SSH, this is security group. We'll select a security group and then expand advanced network configuration. And we'll select one of our interfaces. Let's just type, let's see, why aren't our interfaces showing up? We'll select subnet and 1A. Let's filter there. Management is our first one. And there we go. So now we can select that. We don't need to pick a security group because again, we did that when we were creating the interface. We'll add our second interface. And for this will be inside. Subnet, we can just leave blank. Add another one. Our third one will be the outside. Same, subnet can be blank. Now again, we could have deployed this firewall and just deployed it with the primary interface, let Palo Alto select the IP address, and then came back and attached these two at a later time. But it's good to get in a good habit of just going ahead and managing it to the best expectation so that you know how everything's going to work. Like again, it's nothing wrong with letting AWS select the IP addresses, but if you had a IP address management or an IPAM solution, it's pretty good if the network team gave you the IP addresses to use to know how to manually or explicitly provide those. For storage, we'll go ahead and select GP3, which again is a little bit faster as far as the throughput. And I think it's the same price as GP2. Not sure why they don't make that the default. We'll keep this at 60 gigs. This again may be a little bit of cost if you don't have a new account, but it is free tier eligible up to 30 GB. Actually, let's go ahead and change that to 30 GB. Take advantage of that. For the advanced details, we don't need to change anything here. Nothing with joining a directory service like Active Directory, changing any DNS records, shutdown behavior, stop, termination. Let's actually enable termination protection so that if someone accidentally wanted to delete this, they'd have to basically disable this before or prior to doing so. Detailed CloudWatch monitoring. By default, the CPU utilization, different aspects of this resource are going to be monitored. The interval is 5 minutes, so if you wanted to see every minute, then you need to enable this for a cost. So just a lot of different other aspects here that we could go ahead and select now, and we can change or configure these later. User data. If we wanted to basically deploy this resource, but without logging in, set some parameters here, such as swapping the interfaces, installing a different flavor OS. If this was Linux, you could go ahead and type those commands here and have that do it when the instance launched. But we're good to go there. So double checking again, the three interfaces going backwards. ETH2 is our outside, ETH1 is going to be inside, and the primary or attached is going to be our management interface. We have disabled the public IP address, and what this is if you don't care about the public IP address, what it's going to be every time you shut down and restart, then it's going to change IP addresses. But if you want it to be deterministically, basically static and stay the same, which is what we're gonna do, we're gonna actually deploy an elastic IP address and associate it with the proper interface, M5 large. So yep, host name. So we're good to go on to basically launching this instance. So we'll go ahead and click launch instance, and as you can see here, it's automatically subscribing to the marketplace, which is what we saw here a little bit earlier. There's certain ones that will do that for you. Some they'll actually make you read and subscribe yourself. I haven't really understood what the rhyme or reason is for actually doing that. But this process may take a few minutes, so we'll go ahead and let this one keep running. So it's been just a little bit over 10 minutes since we've deployed this firewall, and still has a status of pending on this screen, which of course there's no refresh button. But if we were to right click here and go to manage subscriptions, we'll actually be able to see that the subscription itself actually shows as being valid, that we have that entitlement that's listed here with the 15-day trial. So what we're going to actually do is go ahead and we're going to launch the same instance and basically cancel out of that. So let's go ahead and go back to EC2 instance and just make sure that it didn't launch in the background, and it hasn't yet. And if by chance it does launch and I do get that email, I'll just go ahead and blow that away. But what we're going to do is basically do the same thing, but I'll probably fast forward through this so that you don't have to see me do the same thing that we just subscribed. So be right back here very shortly. All right, so here we have that screen that shows that we succeeded in launching the second time around M5 large. But one thing to note is if I go ahead and highlight this, come to storage, I did get an error when trying to lower that storage size to 30. So I just left it as the default of 60, and things of course went through perfectly fine. We'll come back in a later video and optimize certain settings like enabling encryption at rest and snapshotting, things like that. But while this is initializing, let's go ahead and take a look real quick. It'll take about up to 5 minutes probably to be able to get in. But we see that we have our private IP addressing information here. And if we scroll down and we were to basically take a look, this is all of the information here in one spot about the networking. We could also come to actions, network, manage IP addresses, and kind of see it in a different view. ETH0 management, ETH1 inside, .20, and of course ETH2 outside, and of course .40. And this is where we would come to basically assign that public IP address, or when we associate that elastic IP, it'll be displayed here. If we needed to do static NAT, this is where we'll come add secondary IP addresses, and then of course NAT that IP addressing. So we'll see that later as well. But again, let's go ahead and get things started here by of course selecting our image. And if you were by chance to forget what that key ID is, let's say you don't recall what it was, then you can see that this is the one that we assign. So like we said, the pretty good software that I'm going to be using is of course MOBA Xterm. This is the client here. MOBA Xterm there, you can definitely visit that website. And again, we need to basically connect to our firewall. So to do that across the management IP address, we do need to get ahead of ourselves here a little bit. We have configured these initial parameters, created a key pair, and accepted the subscription. But we actually need to change the route table a bit there. So let's go ahead and do that. So my IP address has of course changed. Let's refresh it to make sure that it is. I will copy this, and if you're following along, just Google what's your public IP address or use a website such as what'smyipaddress.com. And the reason we need that is because if you recall, our route tables for our management IP address, we don't have any routes in here. So let's go ahead and edit that. And we'll put our very first entry, which is to reach any unknown IP address, we will use the internet gateway. We'll save that change. We'll come back here again for our security group. for that management IP. Let's go ahead and edit that, because this again was different last video. So we'll edit this, we'll change this to my current IP address to permit HTTPS as well as SSHing, or the ability to, and we'll save that rule. We need to now have a public IP address, but in the form of a static IP address, so that it doesn't change if we were to shut down and restart or bring back up our device. So let's allocate one elastic IP address. We'll give this a name tag, and we will call this, to keep this similar naming convention, let's go ahead and call this POC, Palo Alto Firewall Management ETH 0. Yeah, there we go. We'll hit allocate, and then we'll see that here we can allocate this elastic IP address, and we need to now associate this elastic IP address. You can do this in different ways, but since we're already here, let's choose the instance, the private IP address. We know that .10 is management, and if we want to allow this to be reassociated, we can check this, and let's hit associate, network interface. There we go, and we'll hit management, which is .10. There we go. And so now if we go back to our same EC2 tab, and now let's hit refresh, and we will see, if we select it again, that we now have this elastic IP address. And again, network tab, come on down and see it's right here, or of course go back up to actions and networking. So this is actually the IP address that we need to copy. Come back to our instructions. Where are we at? Support usage. Yeah, here we go. And these are the instructions that we need to follow. So again, whatever your SSH client of choice is, for me, I kind of just love MobaX term for various reasons. Then we'll hit session, SSH, put in our hosts. We'll leave the username blank, advanced SSH options, use private key. And now let's go ahead and select that there, click OK. And if all of your routing is well, perfectly fine. All right, so we got an error connecting. Let's see, did our IP address change? Let's go to what's my IP. Let's check for our IPv4, because we should be good to go. It does. Let's see. That does look to be different. So let's go ahead and copy this down. We're going to need to modify that security group entry. All right, so here we go. Troubleshooting on the fly. All right, so we'll save that. And while that's being updated, let's go ahead and prepare to try again. We'll wait for that security group entry to be updated. Looks like it's Good to go there. We'll just hit R in MobeX term to restart our session. There we go. So let's type admin, authenticating with the private key. There we go. So now that we're in, let's go back to the command here. We need to type configure, which we can remember. And then we'll copy this bad boy right here. So let's go to configure to get to exec, privileged exec mode. Right click and hit enter. Let's enter a password. Make it a little complex. 16 characters. And let's go ahead and type commit. These, of course, these changes in Palo Alto don't take effect immediately. You actually have to commit the changes, both in the CLI as well as in the GUI, aka the web console. So we'll wait for that to take place, and then we'll get ready to open up our web console. Shouldn't take too long. So let's hit that public IP address. Here in the browser, we'll just go ahead and type it in. We got 3.213.20.41. All right. Okay, we got no certificate installed. So let's append this with https://. There we go. We'll click advance, proceed to this site. Again, we don't have a SSL cert on this firewall. And there we go. So we're here at the Palo Alto login screen. Again, no configurations here just yet other than setting the password. But let's see, we set that password, validate the interfaces. So let's go ahead and bring our SSH session back in, and let's do show, or actually let's exit out of here. Show interface all. Don't have any configured yet. Show interface management. There we go. .10 net mask default gateway. Okay. So we don't have those interfaces configured. We'll actually configure them down here next video, as this one's getting a little bit long. So we'll leave that unchecked. Let's validate web console, and then we should be able to call this one a day. So let's go back, admin, and let's try that password that we just changed it to. And there we go. So again, we actually deploy this Palo Alto virtual firewall, the equivalent of a 300 series that we saw there in the subscription details. And this, of course, is what the web console looks like. We, of course, are going to get our welcome screen here. You can check this to not show again. Telemetry, we'll potentially take a look at that later. But this, again, 2 virtual CPUs with our M5X large. 10.2.4 software version. We will be upgrading that. But great job here again deploying that firewall. It was actually a lot of steps there. We took our time and made sure that we did it the proper way. That first acceptance of the subscription didn't go so well. Sometimes things like that come along, but knowing how to actually meet those obstacles and overcome them actually makes you a better engineer, administrator, or architect. So want to thank each and every one of you again for hanging with me. This here, part 1 of deploying the Palo Alto firewall inside of AWS. We're going to finish those basic configurations here in the very next video. We're going to go ahead and get this rocking and rolling so that we can go ahead and pop in and play along with those different subscriptions that we get with Bundle 2, such as the URL filtering, threat prevention, IDS, IPS, of course, and of course setting up the VPN so that we can meet each and every one of those contract deliverables, because we're definitely going to get paid here before the end of September. Time is definitely winding down. But I want to thank each and every one of you again for rocking in here with me today. And until next time, stay safe, take care of yourselves. Peace.